Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PropMoto webinar. My name is Franco. I will be your moderator for this. I am the editor and co-founder of PropMoto, and really looking forward to today's conversation about the return to the office, and particularly how a building and the building's technology can help make that office return a little easier. I think that at least here in North America, more and more large companies are returning to the office. And following the Trump administration's kind of lead on the way that they are coming back full time. A lot are coming back 5 days a week and a mandate, and that would have been unthinkable in just post pandemic. And so now that we are seeing that, I think a lot of office buildings are struggling because they aren't able to provide the kind of experience that people want. And even though there are mandates, I think that it's certainly better to have people, happy employees in the office than not. So I think that it's a really great topic and something that we can explore in detail here. Just to remind everyone, this is a live webinar. Anything can happen. Leaf blowers can start, the garbage trucks can come by. But in particular, I would love to hear from all of you. If you guys have questions, we will not be saving time at the end for questions. We would love to hear your questions just as we are talking. If they're good ones and pertinent, we'll answer them right away. And luckily, we have two, experts about building technology, and particularly building communications here. So they can answer some pretty deep questions. So feel free to throw us whatever you can, and we'll do our best to respond accordingly. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce our two panelists here. First, we have Manny Dureja. He's founder and president of Airtower Networks, at the connectivity provider for buildings. Hi, Manny.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Looking forward to
Yeah.
getting into the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us. Next, we have Sanjaya Ranasinghe. He's VP of Research and Development for WiredScore. It's a digital connectivity and smart building rating scheme for real estate. Hi, Sanj.
Hi, Franco. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Great. Well, first, let's just start with a bit of a state of the market, state of the office, right? And I think, having come out of the pandemic, having gone through the hybrid work, even if companies are bringing back these mandates, they are still dealing with different expectations than we had before, right? I think the era of hybrid work has kind of set the understanding for a lot of employees of, what a workplace should be. Obviously, now we heard it a lot, like offices have to compete with your home office, your living room, your local coffee shop, all of that. And so, providing that experience above and beyond is obviously paramount to having people be happy and actually want to come back. So, I just want to talk a little bit about how hybrid work exactly has reshaped these 10 expectations, and maybe what offices need to do to raise the bar, right? To meet that higher expectations. Manny, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that what we're experiencing with our clientele, who are generally building owners and owners of these Class A, B office buildings, where a lot of companies are coming back to the office for the first time, 5 days a week in years, and certainly since pre-pandemic times, has been that the needs and the requirements of what connectivity was pre-pandemic to what they are today have significantly transformed. And what it's done in that transformation is put a lot more emphasis on the building and the infrastructure within that building to have the forms of connectivity for employees to come back to. Well, pre-pandemic, we had a lot of desk phones and VoIP phones, whether if it was a POTS line or if it was a VoIP line. During the pandemic, though, of course, and for years afterwards, a lot of the office managers were looking at reducing bills. One of the first bills that they were reducing were those telephones that were at everyone's desks, and that, of course, combined with just reducing office space in general and creating this open office environment where a lot of organizations have kind of shifted to that over the recent years. So as everyone starts to come back now in a much bigger way, we've seen major movements of that this year alone. I think it was Amazon started in January, full time, 5 days a week. Dell this month, JP Morgan next month. That everyone's coming back to 5 days a week, where now one of the most critical forms of connectivity that they use, their telephones to make calls, get deals done, isn't there like it used to be. So the reliance on their wireless devices and cell phones has has definitely been the primary mode of connectivity. So being able to supply that, provide that within a building environment has always been a challenge. That's only been exacerbated because of that issue now, and then of course just some of the shifts with our towers and how that's providing signals. So the net of it that we're seeing there, just to put a bit more succinctly, is where the office environment that employees were working within 5 years ago is a lot different than the office environment that they're coming into today. That is necessitating a lot of these requirements around connectivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a perfect analogy because I don't think workers and their bosses are always aligned. But if you look at the office demand, it's pretty obvious that these kind of premium tech forward offices are much more in demand than their kind of older counterparts, right? We see the kind of bifurcation in the market. I hear about it all the time where the top buildings are leased out and other ones are really, really struggling. So I think it's pretty obvious that people want technology, but what technology in particular? I think it's really easy to just say, oh, well, sprinkle some technology on it and everything will be better, right? And which technology that is, I think obviously depends a lot on the company, but getting it right, I think will helps building owners really make sure that their spend is well spent. Sanj, I'd love to hear from you maybe about what you're seeing. I know you guys have a smart building score, but what are the kind of smart additions to buildings do you think are really moving the needle when it comes to office leasing?
Yeah, great question. I think sort of touching a little bit on Manny's point as well, like we're talking about return to office, but it's not return to desk. I think that's that removal of the phone, the removal of the desktop computer. We all want to work in different ways around the office. And that's where not only what Manny was talking about with great cell coverage, great wireless coverage, being enabling that from all our devices, but also that environment around us being as user friendly as possible. I think what we've seen from SmartScore, our smart building certification, which is just about to go through into its third revision, is that real we started quite broad. We said let's get all the technology and use cases and really fill this building and almost like an incubator, a test bed of what's going to work. And slowly we've managed to refine this set of user stories down from 60 to around 30. And we're seeing those key fundamentals, things like street to suite access on access control, just making that experience for you as a worker or any visitors you have coming into the building as seamless as possible will make a difference. I was actually chatting about a building where Apple are a landlord, an occupier recently, and they noticed that people who used Android handsets got into the building much quicker than all their employees with Apple handsets. So they actually invested with the landlord to make that solution as seamless as possible for their employees, because it's not only that wasted time and effort, but it's the start of your day. It's the start of every working motion, and actually getting that experience, getting to your space, getting ready to work as easy as possible is something that we're really seeing. And it's not rocket science access control, but getting it right and getting it smooth is really important to that overall experience, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Fair or not, any little glitch in the kind of experience, I think, really sets an office back, right? And people expect it to be perfect every time. And I think that it's hard. It's a hard bar to hit, but that's the expectation. I think it's the interesting thing to me about this bifurcation of the market is that here you have a lot of buildings that need upgrades that now don't have really the cash flow to easily do them, right? They're having to beg, borrow, and steal to make the money. I think I just want to since we might be talking to some people here with some buildings that need some significant upgrades, let's maybe try to really drive home how these kind of smart building upgrades help drive occupancy and eventually ROI, right? And the long-term value of a building. Sanj, we'll start on you, but Manny, I'll come around to you.
Yeah, well, I think and I love the title of this session around being the tech stack and really thinking about, behind the scenes of every building, there is infrastructure, equipment, setup, space that makes that building hum. And I think foundational to that tech stack is the connectivity space. So the work that Manny's talking about with wireless and fiber connectivity, and just making sure that a building is becoming like as plug and play as possible. Obviously, as a landlord, you don't want to be necessarily being involved in every negotiation between ISPs and occupiers for getting that service, but having that infrastructure, making it as transparent as possible for how a new occupier or an occupier can upgrade their connectivity by simply plugging into the great infrastructure that building's been set up is key. And it's where it's really exciting to see the likes of Airtower and other players work in the market where they're really enabling landlords to become, almost becoming that like physical service provider, setting them up with key fundamental services such as like wireless coverage, but also like setting up that backbone, setting up that infrastructure in the right way, in a scalable way that means that as you go through new occupiers or occupiers want to go through upgrades, they're in a real position that it's a it's a painless process from as far as the interaction with the landlord's concerned.
Manny, interested to hear from you. What do you think as far as like, what are the ways that these upgrades can be done to really, produce some ROI, right? I think people are looking for pretty quick returns for any capital expenditures right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a complicated issue and they're pretty technical. Connectivity is a technical challenge to have to sort through. I mean, we've aimed, within our business here at Airtower just to help simplify that, demystify that. We like to call it with the real estate community. But I mean, there's a couple of components to this. The first one on the ROI, it used to be that the primary and in some cases the sole purpose of the connectivity was for the users, the tenants, the people coming in and out of the building, and that continues to be a real driver. Of course, as you're looking at occupancy or re-up on lease agreements where those employees and tenants need to feel satisfied that they can get business done by having adequate connectivity in their workspace. But today we're also solving around, it's not just who, but what is connecting to connectivity that needs the fiber, the internet, wireless connectivity. One of the major multi-decade challenges that the real estate community is dealing with are ESG credits in the solution and solving for that across their portfolios to deal with particular federal level mandates that are driving their buildings to become more efficient, energy efficient over time. We talk about a lot of that IoT that's driving this to become more efficient, or at least track the building's ability to become more energy efficient. Connectivity for those devices, that IoT becomes its form of power, of its form of getting the electric off the grid, is actually being able to deliver those data packets back and forth and produce those real-time reports that the building ownership community is needing to solve for now, to solve some of these federal challenges that are coming ahead. So as you look at the tenant demand, revenue increase to driving operational efficiencies, connectivity really finds itself to be right at the core of it all. So if you got ROI from a revenue perspective, you have ROI from making the building more energy efficient over time, but combined, it's pretty powerful. To make the compelling argument to we need to put this in our building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a hard thing to tell someone to upgrade their office, particularly because the technology is moving, right? So you're shooting at a moving target. And so I think a lot of people sometimes sit on their hands a little bit and say, well, let's see how this shakes out, right? Let's see which of these kind of protocols wins, let's see, what if there's any new kind of newfangled technology that's going to come and make everything else obsolete. So how can maybe office owners and office managers think about their tech stack insofar as building something that is future proof, right, that can be built on top of? Manny, I'll stick with you on this one. How do you feel about that? Like when you talk through this with people, what do you say is kind of the first step, something that you can't go wrong by upgrading?
Yep, sorry there to say that muted. When we look at this, I mean, we think about internet and just connectivity today alongside of air and water, electricity coming in. So, when we think about technology, uh, by delivering the form of connectivity and just in a ubiquitous form of connectivity like Wi-Fi, like cellular connectivity, it really helps to drive some of the layers to remain on the agnostic side as we are looking at it today to as long as we can provide that form of accessing internet, accessing information to through effectively one or two of the most common uses of wireless connectivity and then a fiber circuit, uh, that challenge sits a little bit ahead of the stack and somewhat, in an umbrella to help shield all of the other IoT devices or technology devices that, yeah, probably are going to change a lot over the decades to come. But today, we're looking at powering these buildings when we talk about connectivity in the form of infrastructure, more like bringing in the electric grid and tying the building in for the first time to provide those services, which will drive a lot of use cases and a lot of technological shifts over the decades to come.
Mm-hmm. Sanj, what do you think? What's the kind of way to look at the building tech stack insofar as this is the kind of the foundational piece that can be built on top of, and maybe these other pieces can wait.
Yeah, I think I align with Manny on this, but like we talk about connectivity being a utility, but it's not that simple. It's not like a tap and water comes out and water is water. It is about this mix and it's getting this right blend between the wired connectivity, the local networking you might need, the cellular and the Wi-Fi. And only then, only when it becomes like wherever I am on whatever device I am doing whatever I'm trying to do, is it a utility? Otherwise, the friction is always there. And I think that cannot be underestimated around like it is not about picking, whilst you can't like pick the right end protocol for an IoT device, but you're not going to go wrong with getting that full blend of like cellular, Wi-Fi, and wired connectivity as your basis. I think then obviously the challenge is like what's under the landlord control in terms of delivering service. So amenity spaces, lobbies, as we're trying to make that more, where buildings are starting to offer, productivity-based amenity like conferencing rooms and meeting spaces. Make sure that connectivity is not only available of high quality but super secure is becoming a big thing. Like one of the things we're really starting to see is public Wi-Fi in buildings. I think used to be like a nice to have, something you'd have in the lobby, people do just as they're waiting for their meeting. But now office workers are using that every day because they want to work in a different space in the building. And the scrutiny that's coming under from a cybersecurity perspective and from like a data protection, data usage perspective is getting higher and higher. Because suddenly, full on, day-to-day work is happening on that sort of landlord owned network where in part, and I think that's where like getting great service, get that sort of not only the physical infrastructure in place, not only the access points and the network connectivity done, but having someone that's available to do the managed service side of this, to make sure you've got someone that's fully up to speed on latest things from a vulnerability perspective or the latest thing from a best practice on how to have networks set up so that you can slowly, it's not a continual hardware shift, but it is a continual management shift. Can you change, make sure things on the latest software, make sure things are running on the right protocols from a security perspective, and having that as part of that seamless connectivity offering, which means not only like is that internet and that connection always there, you can always rely on it being safe and secure. Because IT teams are going to come and look at that, come and say, actually, this isn't, we can't, our team can't use this network. It's just not safe for us. And making sure that is, that the connectivity around the building is as secure and as capable as those in the tenant space, I think is going to become critical there.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something I would like to dive in a little bit more on here is the security aspect. Obviously, certain enterprise clients, they have, when they occupiers, they come in and they have their network they want, right? They have their IT team. And so now you get buildings that have to kind of, manage not only their own, their own networks, but everyone else's. How to maybe what's some of the best practices for doing that to build this infrastructure that can be plugged into no matter how the tenants want their kind of own private networks.
Mhm.
Manny, how about here? Bye. from you about this.
Yeah, when it comes to security, and that becomes one of the primary objectives that we're looking to achieve increasingly. That's the case everywhere. It used to be maybe in a hospital, in other sorts of settings where there's private information that's flowing constantly. That security was the biggest concern. Today, that's happening in most of the built environment with us, with security being top of the discussion. When we get into looking through the right applications or the form of connectivity, we tend to start moving toward the bucket of cellular connectivity, because of the simplification that's been done from these mobile carriers, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, to build massive security stacks behind their core networks that everyone's already subscribed to. As you walk in, everyone generally has Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, and the employers have also, for the most part, gotten comfortable with all three of those in many cases, for their own security protocols to allow everyone the access to information. So, the ability to have tighter security and the ability to seamlessly connect people the moment that they walk through the door, no matter what phone they have in their pocket, with which carrier, uh, begin or key factors why we end up moving toward a cellular connectivity in a lot of these environments today.
Yeah, Sanj, I want to hear from you from this, but I'm going to layer on another piece of this, right? Is that not only do occupiers have their own networks, they're often now adding their own sensor networks, right? Their own IoT devices, and they are asking for some of the data that the building is collecting, right? They want to know, just like everyone else, when are people coming, right? What's the expectations? So how does maybe buildings that kind of manage that, where now you have this, not only two connectivity or multiple connectivities, you have multiple entire kind of data networks inside of them.
Yeah, I think in terms of the landlord occupier relationship, much like cyber, it's about being on the front foot, like reacting to as a landlord, reacting to an occupier saying, I need energy data is going to be really hard. We found that in buildings that can set up that integration, that's there, like, okay, we don't know what it's going to integrate to, but we're in a way that we know we can do floor by floor or quarter floor level power metering. We can have that data ready. We can tie that up to bills. We can, give a platform that can be both not only viewed, so someone can log into it and see it, but also integrate at an API level. Is that proactive step that means that and it's like relatively cheap, you're going to be measuring energy, you're going to be doing that for your own uh, operational cases, but thinking that extra step of, okay, like how do I segment this and how do I present this back to occupiers should they request it, and getting on the front foot and saying this is how we do it. And we've started to see that coming up in lease negotiations, like actually like, right, this is the data sharing, this is the cyber side of things. And much like in the past, access agreements or way leaves in the UK had always been a challenge for getting telecoms plugged in. And that's a lot of it down to like not forward thinking, not thinking, well, let's take shared responsibility of how we get this interface set up. We're seeing the same with data now, is that like if you think I'm going to be reactive about how I share my data, it's always going to be a challenge. You're going to end up with custom integrations for every single occupier because they're gonna run it. They're going to say, this is how we do it. Whereas being there, set up, templated, here's a way that we'll share data, here's the data we'll share, really gets you on the front foot and gets you in a position where you can start to like build a better relationship as well with those occupiers when looking at that data sharing piece.
Great point. We have a question here I would love to get to. Can you comment on what technologies of value, HVAC, smart lighting, occupancy, are currently providing the highest ROI and, for building owner investment? Sanj, what's your kind of take on that?
I think anything that's like right now, the easy answer is anything that uses energy. So anything like, so looking at HVAC, if you can save, that's where you're going to make the biggest savings from an ROI perspective for sure. I think the occupancy one is a real challenge. It feels like it should be like the magic thing. You look at retail, you look at like the work people could do with occupancy data and like positioning items on shelves or setting out most efficient routes and like really return that data. I think the landlord occupier relationship isn't there yet to be able to share occupancy data. No one's really sure why someone's asking for it, and therefore like that utilize that even if the data was available, people are unsure about it. It's not the best quality. So whilst I really wish that's like, that's a great landlord occupier interface point, I really feel like, the simple things like make the building use less energy. That's going to save you
Mhm.
money, and it's going to be a better building,
Yes.
as Manny sort of touched on before, is the key one to focus on.
Manny, what are your
Completely
thoughts
agree.
on that?
No, I think that's what Sanjay said. There's spot on. I mean, those are exactly right. I mean, from
Yeah.
when you look at the list that was provided here by one of our attendees here today, I think those are certainly the elevated ones.
Yeah, what interests me from the people I've talked to is that it's not only about the cost side of the ledger, right? When you look at the ROI, it's also the revenue, right? If you can drive revenue, that can oftentimes, and when it comes to revenue, that's leasing. What I think is interesting, what you got into, Sanj, is that that occupancy piece can actually help make the case for an office, right? But it's not just the data alone, right? That data needs to be used in the correct way, right? It needs your leasing team needs to have access to it. Your office managers and your facilities team, and it also requires a little bit of a retooling
Mhm.
of the kind of tenant landlord relationship, right? It's
Yeah.
not about just collecting rent anymore, like really becoming that partner, showing them when people are coming in, what amenities they're using, and making the case for the office. I think from what I have heard and the people that I have interviewed, that's kind of a overlooked piece of this, right? I think if you focus only on cost, that's at your peril, right? Where, boosting revenue sometimes can do a lot more, than kind of trying to take 5% off of your energy bill or something. Well, thank you, Brad, for that great question. Please keep them coming. Want to keep moving along with this. I think when these occupiers and landlords actually do decide to make these investments, one of the difficulties is that these are occupied spaces. It's not like you can just kind of rip everything out and put everything back right away. So let's maybe talk about some best practices of how to make required investments in a way that doesn't disrupt the people that work there, that they can still have this same great experience like we talked about without a lot of construction noise and all of the other problems that are associated with these upgrades. Manny, what have you seen with your clients? How have they kind of managed this?
Yeah, great question. I mean, just for a little bit of background, Airtower is in 175 million square feet of buildings today, and where a lot of those have been retrofits, where we have tenants, and in some cases even in multifamily residents, which gets in a whole other layer of tenants when it comes to living space. But we've done a lot of the retrofits. So there's a series of steps that we follow in any one of those in any one of those infrastructure builds. Uh, and those steps, typically begin with our project management team being heavily coordinated with property management and the on-site uh, team, and just notifications that have to go out weeks and weeks ahead of time, and then as you get into the actual trenches of the build, in daily bite sizes and communication between Airtower property management maybe needing to relay back to their tenants day in and day out. And then the second aspect to it from the constructability perspective ends up being coordination with building engineering or the facilities management, because we need access to a lot of times every nook and cranny of a building, and there may be facilities or rooms locked that aren't being utilized today. So part of that daily coordination happens with the facilities and building engineering team, just to make sure we're gaining access and we don't have people hanging around the hallways while we're waiting for that access. It's running pretty efficiently to keep out everyone's way. I think is usually the primary objective there. And then when you get into the coordination and the constructability, safety is a top concern. When it comes to deployments, safety for the tenants coming in and out, to make sure that there's no ladder or anything in their way. And then, of course, the safety for the installers too, to make sure that that they're not being put in any sort of harm's way either. So, coordinating safety as a key objective throughout the facility ends up being great concern. But I'd say communication across those channels, and then safety planning, end up being two areas that we focus in on.
Great. Sanj, anything to add?
Yeah, I think like the way that Manny put it forward is spot on. Obviously, living through the reality of the retrofits, but I think it also highlights the point of like a lot of the we don't know a lot of stuff in our buildings, even in like brand new builds. You don't know the last person that's plugged something into a network, and actually
Yep.
taking on that responsibility as part of the facility planning or as part of the planning for a retrofit, and taking a step back and saying like, this is how this building's tech stack is coordinated. This is where the services are coming in. This is where they're demarked. This is where they travel vertically. This is where how they get out to occupy space. These risers are this percentage full, and getting that starting point, like a map, like your subway map of the building, from a connectivity perspective in place is key because then you can start to work out, okay, these are the pinch points in the network. These are the points that are going to be really painful when we do that retrofit work. This is where maybe it's weekend access or however you want to do it. But at the same time, you've got that for your day-to-day like upgrades, but that's a incredibly useful resource. If you then like layer on not only the core connectivity infrastructure, but then how are the smarts of the building, how are the BMS or the HVAC, the lighting, how does that layer in? And you really get to what we call like an asset inventory of the technology of the building. I think that harking back to the title about the tech stack, just really understanding the bones and the sinews and the nerves that make up the building, getting that in place and having it as something that you can really use as a development tool almost and an interactive tool that you can work with people and explain where incremental improvements could be made, which will have like the biggest improvements on that overall capability of the tech stack
Mhm.
for the building is super important when you're attacking something as challenging as a retrofit with incumbent occupiers.
Yeah, sure. I want to talk a little bit about automation. I mean, this is a huge topic, and I think there's multiple definitions for it, and I want to touch on all of them. Right. First, I think we have the kind of back end building automation. Right. We have, getting the kind of building management team the ability to be able to automatically adjust HVAC setting points and all of that. But then I think it's also has to do with the occupiers, right? For them to be able to easily install new sensors, easily access new networks, bring people in. Obviously, there's a lot more kind of people coming and going in offices before than ever, having access control be easier for visitors. So what's the kind of way to think about this tech in a way that lends itself to this kind of automation, right? That now can be built on in a way that reduces the amount of IT work that is needed every time any little thing needs to happen. Sanj, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think it sort of touches on a point Manny made before as well. Like the added complication here is like how much are you doing this in the tenant space and how much are you doing this in the landlord space?
Mhm.
And like where you can really start to overstretch yourself is as a landlord thinking, I know what every tenant's going to want. I'm going to do this standard fit out. Everyone wants occupancy sensors, everyone, and you'll find that's where you hit the hurdle, like overcommitting. But I think using your landlord space as a proof of concept for occupiers, showing them that you are the subject matter expert for your building, you will have engaged with the supply chain that's best for your building and showing like this is what we can achieve, these are our supplies and this is how it could extend into your space is something that we're seeing landlords trying to experiment with, and it's bringing that landlord occupier relationship closer again, like almost becoming like a technology service provider but not quite as a landlord is that push because you know, it's a fast moving world, as you touched on. If you've trialed something, you know it works in your building, you know it integrates with other systems, there's a good chance that, that's the right solution for an occupier. And if they've got the capability of then building that out, maybe with some saving or revenue share, like savings because common infrastructure can be used, or all the network integrations have already been done. That's a really um, proactive way of getting to that place of getting like the best sensor distribution in place without like falling to the pitfall of overcommitting to the wrong type of sensor with the wrong manufacturer on the wrong network.
Annie, what do you think? Anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean that's all spot on. I mean, yeah, I think when we talk about the property management organizations and the asset ownership groups and building out their own technology teams, that's been a big push over the recent years. I think one of the greatest things that owners and property management have found is they like a lot of us, and when we get more integrated with our technology, we get comfortable the way things are devices and our smart homes working and our smart office and smart car and the list goes on now, right? With our forms of smart connectivity or smart devices, the it creates a stickiness effect. And when we talk about, the ability for your staff to walk in and make those calls, your space to have a lot of smarts because of the sensors and devices like occupancy monitoring, and of course you got a cheaper electric bill than your last office because your space has more automation built in. It creates a stickiness effect that will allow for the ownership and the asset and property management groups to continue renewing those tenants over the course of time, and creating just a better tenant satisfaction score. So, investing into that zone and driving that conversation out, we think is very important, for the building owner community. And oftentimes it does get a bit technical pretty quickly. There's groups like WiredScore and Airtower that are oftentimes brought into those discussions with those asset owners, property managers, to help really kind of demystify again the connectivity discussions, or what do we need? What are the most, what if I have a menu of options here? Which ones will drive the greatest ROI, not only for the building, but back to the tenant space. So I think, number one, that tenant space, that piece for me is top line. But I mean, go back to what Saj said. I mean, I am, absolutely. I mean, the building owner may have an opportunity to reduce costs because of the efficiencies that will be driven out of sharing more and driving it into more square footage across the building, and maybe even, with some of our arrangements in a revenue share agreement where there's an opportunity for them to make a little bit of a premium on those additional services that they're offering to their tenant space. So more reiterating exactly what Sam said. Yeah.
We've talked about this a little already, but I want to get a little more in depth about these, sensors, deploying sensors. I think this is a big, piece of every smart building, but a complicated one, right? There's a lot of different types of sensors. Where do you run them? Do you put them into the light fixtures, right? Where do they kind of sit? There's lots of different options. If anyone has been to a prop tech trade show like I have, I mean, it's just rows and rows of these different companies that all say that
Yeah.
theirs is the best. So it can be a little hard to understand. And I know this is a tricky question because every building is different, right? So probably the best option is different for them. But what are some of the ways to think about maybe which types of sensors and which types of sensor networks are best for each type of building? Manny, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I think there are a plethora of options. And I mean, just imagine being a CIO or a CTO of one of these real estate groups these days. And there's a lot of pitches coming their way, and when you look at that stack of what becomes the most important, that was a great question. I think that Brad had asked here as one of the attendees earlier, which ones. I think then it also becomes of which companies. Is there ability for those companies to have more integrations with, if they're an HV analytics company, do they have occupancy monitoring on the roadmap, and automation on the roadmap if it's not there today, to help know that, there's an actual roadmap here for this technology to continue to evolve inside of my building, and that I'm going to ride behind that horse, if you will, with choosing those devices out there. But I think that's it is pretty fragmented out there. It continues to be, and driving through, really, number one, the use case, and number two, what's the vision for that CIO or that business as a building owner? What do they want to drive out over the next 10 years, and being able to build a stack that checks both of those boxes would be, first two I would bring up.
Great points. Sanjay, anything to add?
Yeah, I think sort of building a bit on where Manny was at with this is like there are loads of sensors out there. There's lots of technologies. Let's cut it into two things. From a sensor perspective, no, they're generally not the same. Like two companies will have different things. And what we've worked a lot with our Smart Score framework is pick the use cases you want. Understand, like, okay, you want to do energy monitoring. What energy monitoring do you want to do? And then go to something else. You want to do light sensing. You want to do shade control. Get all those use cases together, and don't treat each of those as one and find one point solution for each one. Actually, then take the full set of use cases and compare that to the market, because you'll often find that one sensor technology will do two or three of those use cases, another will do 4 or 5 of them, and then you can build like the leanest coverage of the number of sensors to the use cases you want, and then add priorities into those. You work out which one you roll out first. So I think it's really important that you're matching the actual end use cases rather than like I want to monitor energy. It's like, why do you want to do that? Who do you want to do it for? How regularly you want to do it? Really get to the nitty gritty before speccing it out. But then I think from a more technology perspective, it's like thinking like how much of this retrofit? If you're putting sensors on top of existing systems, then maybe you want something which is more battery powered, so you don't have to worry about how you're going to plug it in. It might use one of these sort of more specific IoT protocols such as Sigfox or LoRaWAN, because it's really like that's just on top. You don't need to worry about any of the network infrastructure in the building already. You can just layer it on top. If you're bringing something new in, then think about how you're best using that network infrastructure you've got. Does that mean you can start to use PoE, so powered over the Ethernet cable sensor technology, which is really leveraging that core infrastructure you've already got in place. And then if you're in those more secure setup. So potentially a good use case for Manny is talk about if you're in as a landlord doing things in the occupier space, that's where cellular based sensors could be great because actually the only connectivity you have which is open to you is that sort of your three main providers offering over the cellular network without so you don't have to actually touch the landlord network your occupier's network at all, but you're still getting those returns on getting that data in place. So I think there's two cases, like make sure you've got the right fit of sensor technologies to your use cases and then consider the connectivity type that you need. And from there, that's sort of your two key drivers to picking your core technology that you should be going for.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wanted to bring up something too that one of the biggest shifts that I have seen in the last few months is the kind of push away from this sustainability green building, right? I think obviously this has a lot to do with the current administration in the US, like not being very interested in the sustainability aspect, but do you guys still see that this is an important thing? I know, obviously the European Union still has a lot of mandates about carbon footprint and energy reduction. Do you think that we're going to continue to see heavy investment in technologies that help occupiers and building owners, both reduce energy but also report, right? Because I know that there is some reporting requirements, like I said, especially when it comes to the EU. Sanj, I know that you're there in the UK. What are you
Yeah.
saying?
Um, it's good question. I can take a breath before answering it. I think from an energy perspective, from power in particular, one of the things that we're really seeing more of is actually we should be using less power because we need more resilient power. We need to make sure that everything
Mhm.
is going to carry on working. And actually going for that extent of like, oh, power doesn't matter. What happens then is you get brownouts and you get to a position where like your building can't actually operate because you don't have enough power to run it. So I think I'd go from a slightly different angle now. Is that we're really looking at that resiliency of power, and in that comes technologies such as batteries or renewables because they're starting to give different sources of getting that power to the building, which means that building's always on. So rather than sort of thinking about this from a true, as well as the efficiency side of it, balancing in the power resiliency to make sure, just like your network resiliency, you don't want one thing that takes out the whole building, and it's, a build, more connected devices is more power, and that more power might drive more savings, but ultimately, I think that reshift is good to make sure that we're using power in the most effective way to ensure that we can always operate in a building, um, rather than maybe necessarily purely driving on a true energy efficiency. Because an empty building is the most energy efficient one, and you've got to layer in the productivity side of that as well.
Good point. Manny, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess being more stateside, certainly, appreciate, the point there that maybe in the current administration that some of the, that the gas pedal doesn't have to be completely floored right now, like they found in some of the past administrations. But Yeah, sort of the call I mentioned, they're solving a multi-decade issue. And I think one thing that is for sure is that that the real estate community has recognized this is a multi-decade issue. It's a macro concern. We're running out of power off of the grid. So regardless of who will be, what the policies may be, probably when we look at the next 10 to 20 years, and the fact that this is a direction that looks like we will have to go. And I think you look at the commercial sector, office buildings and hospitals combined within commercial, it accounts for 30% of energy consumption in the United States. With a lot of our real estate owner customers now, they own industrial buildings too. That accounts for another 35% of energy consumption. A lot of the owners that we work with also have a multifamily stack of assets that they own. When you look at residential as a whole, and you combine those with the first two there, we're now at like 95% of electric consumption. Now, some of the residential, single family homes, of course, but there's a large amount of that. 1/3 of America lives in apartments today. So when you put it all together and you look at the multi-decade issue here, what we are definitely getting the views of that this is not going anywhere. I mean, major real estate groups across the United States here today have 100 people inside of their ESG departments today, right? I mean, from where that was even 5 to 7 years ago, that's a pretty significant uptick. So, when you look at that as a multi-decade issue, we don't think that that's been going anywhere. But to the point earlier, Franco, are we seeing maybe the gas pedal being laid off a bit? Sure, but you combine that with the same challenge that we were looking at from a tech stack, a CIO saying, I've got to make this decision around connectivity today. I need to put something in for these tenants that are all moving in back to the office, but I don't want to pay for a separate system to solve some of this ESG credits that I have to solve over the next decade. How can I look at a roadmap here of how that all gets stacked together and drives the biggest ROI for my business? And that's the real conversation that we're having out there.
Yeah, and what I've found interesting is, how even though the kind of on the federal level, right, they have taken their foot off the gas, like you said, Manny, that there's still a lot of the momentum in place. I talked to someone a few days ago about kind of CPACE, right? These kind of CPACE upgrades is the way to finance retrofits, and that's a state-run uh, uh, organization or program, and so they are still seeing lots of demand for that. And I think a lot of these kind of energy efficiency slash sustainability upgrades, you can find good financing for them. And right now with the high interest rates, if you can get that, I think there can be a lot of case to be made that it's still a very, very good investment, particularly if you can get those good loans. So hopefully I am
Big
one
time.
that I'm still crossing my fingers that we're going to be able to reduce our carbon footprint and energy consumption. So I think the market forces still seem to be kind of pushing us in that direction. I want to look forward, maybe over the horizon a little bit here. I think we all kind of understand the technology that's out there now, but like I said, one of the hard things about investing in technology is the best day to invest is probably tomorrow, right? When you know a little bit more about the upcoming things. So what are some of the new technologies that are coming out that maybe owners and occupiers should be aware of, right? I'm thinking 6G, I've heard kind of talk of that, right? Maybe the need for edge computing as more kind of AI computer vision starts to be deployed in more and more buildings. What are you kind of thinking about that as far as what are the up and coming things to think about when planning a building's tech stack? Manny, what do you think? I see you smiling there.
Well, the data center. Our business is a digital infrastructure company. We provide this digital infrastructure as a service for the real estate community for building connectivity. Side to the side of us and adjacent to us within our digital infrastructure umbrella are actually data centers that are looked at, kind of a liked asset and under that umbrella. So, we're getting a lot of visibility to what's changing here. And when we go back to the first point, energy consumption, we need 5 times more power to power the amount of data centers over the years ahead to compute all this AI. So number one, that's talking to each other a bit. A lot of our real estate customers are actually developing now these data center sites that are helping to power AI. So one, I think there's a real big business opportunity to diversify real estate assets across these portfolios. But as you zoom into now the applications and how does this affect an office space? Uh, it gets very interesting. I mean, we talk about automation, for example, that a bit, that the feature of someone being able to drive in or drive out rather of a garage at 5 o'clock, and now their particular space in their office is kind of shutting down for both HVAC and lighting, and to do that across maybe every person, because we can get that granular now with connectivity, and to feature all of that and have it all talk to each other between AI. I think that there's a lot of efficiencies that we're going to continue to drive, for the real estate community, using the technology. But I mean, I'll just kind of start off with that first one and maybe flip it over to Sanj to think with some of his
I'm
own
gonna flip
thoughts
it.
and use
I'm gonna
cases.
flip it
But
over to you, Sanj. But I have one more thing I'm gonna layer on this, Manny,
yeah,
for you, which is
yeah,
what
please.
about kind of satellite communication? I know, obviously the White House is talking about bringing in Starlink. I think there probably
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah,
some owners that say, hey, well, I'm sure this
yeah,
is a moot point. Like eventually we're all just gonna connect to Starlink and not have to worry about
yeah,
any of this. Do you think that's a
yeah.
legitimate thought?
Yeah, we're using satellite connectivity as alternate fiber internet into our buildings today, powering our networks, powering those tenants with their connectivity. One thing we have found is currently there's going to in maybe the 20 as of March 2025, the setting looks like there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of what
Hmm.
we've all been used to when it comes to fiber connectivity. I think the satellite getting us into places to connect where we've never connected before to this day. In the mountains and in other areas where we could go through dead zones as we're driving down the road. I mean, it's huge. But when we get into where a lot of these buildings are located in urban environments, there's a lot of options out there for fiber connectivity. We find that it continues to remain the most reliable, fastest way to get it done and get to the speeds that we need to today. But hey, over the next decade, that's going to continue to change. That technology will only improve, and we look forward to having another form of redundancy and connectivity to help power the internet inside of these buildings. But when we think about satellite, it's not really providing the service inside of the buildings. It's more providing the conduit of internet connectivity, like a fiber.
Hmm.
So.
All right, Sanj, what about you? I know you guys are always kind of retooling your, WiredScore,
Yeah.
SmartScore. What are some of the emerging technologies that you think are going to eventually affect, a
Yes,
building?
I'll carry on the satellite point because I think Manny's put it exactly right, and that's the bit I'm really excited about. It's not the fact that I need to have a fiber provider, a cellular provider, and a satellite provider. Is like as an occupier, I want a building that's using satellite as that resilience. Is so like I've got another way of making sure my core connectivity is going to continue to be great, and I think that's a really exciting use case. It's already been proven in in more remote areas where there's already direct to cell mobile access on the likes of T-Mobile with Starlink, and that use case of just how it layers two technologies together, I think is really exciting. Beyond that, I think from a tech perspective, touching back on power, um, is that idea of the all electric building. We're adding in EV charging, we're moving away to electric heating, and how we get to really optimize that electrical power drive in the building with sensors, with monitoring is like a key shift. And I think the last one, you sort of talking about 5G and 6G, a mobile generation lasts roughly a decade. And what we have to really remember is like we left the office in 2020. 5G wasn't really the mainstay. And we've come back in force now, and we're halfway through that decade. So actually, like it's gonna feel like a huge rush, I think, from as we go to 5G to the next one. And this isn't like my message here is not buildings need to get ready for 6G because I know anyone that can tell you what that means. Uh, let's say they're either a better man than me or they're not. But like I think it's a signal that we need to step up a level. Like 2G and 3G networks are being turned off around the world at different times. Buildings need to be native 4G because 5G is the mainstay today. And I think it is that signal of, look, as a building, everything's a little bit slower, everything's a little bit, it's not the cutting edge of technology, but when that cutting edge moves up, we make sure that buildings are moving up a level, whether that's on which mobile technology is doing or which Wi-Fi technology is using, always making sure that you're leveling up at the same time the top end of the market from a technology perspective is leveling up, I think is that key direction that we need to be moving in.
Great point. All right, to end here, I would love to just talk a little bit about, crafting this kind of long-term strategy. And, we've touched on it a bit, but, I think I'm looking, obviously the technology part is important, right? But I think organizationally, building owners are kind of needing to retool how they have, their businesses, how they deal with these upcoming technologies. So maybe talk to me about, make the case, first of all, that this should be, a big point for building owners, office owners, and occupiers going forward, and maybe how to instill this kind of tech thinking, right? This kind of forward thinking mindset into an organization that you think will help achieve these long-term goals. Sanj, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Why do I think connectivity and technology is here to stay? I think, like, again, we take this sort of pause we've been on for the last 5 years. In that time period, the number of connected devices we each rely on has doubled. Be that at home, be that in office.
Mm-hmm.
We're now walking around with phones and watches and laptops and tablets, and that's going to double again. That rate of change, and it's going to be more things that talk to other things rather than people that talking to other people via this connectivity. But it's here to stay. We're going to need that. I think from a landlord perspective, we've touched on it a little time, but it's like upskilling landlords, making sure facilities teams can talk about connectivity and that real opportunity for bringing the talent and retaining the talent that actually run our buildings. The number of people that are behind the scenes on a building from an engineering, facilities, property management perspective, that's what makes buildings work. They're the unique individuals that mean these things continue to like operate in the way we need, and
Great
making
point.
sure they've got the ability to have access to new tools, new capabilities, and the training, I think is going to be the key place that makes that landlord occupier relationship smoother and moves into the world that Manny's been talking about, like, the revenue share opportunities, the becoming a service provider of sorts, for occupiers, which is really driving that, top high class, flight to quality mindset of the building being a service rather than
Mm-hmm.
just a physical entity.
Manny, take us home. What do you think? How can organizations kind of retool their thinking to really make this
Yeah.
front and center to their
Yeah,
business?
I made a broad stroke earlier that when we think about connectivity and making sure that a robust form of infrastructure is installed to actually even provide connectivity of the current state and one that can continue to expand as things like 6G or whatever continue to evolve out there. It really just starts with being able to put internet infrastructure into the building because believe it or not a lot of buildings out there just don't have it. Or if they did 10 years ago, it's dilapidated today, wasn't maintained properly and just may have not been built right. So, to continue with passing it on. So, oftentimes in organizations when initiatives start where they quickly fall dead in their tracks is who's going to pay for this? How are we going to cover the cost of this? Because particularly the infrastructure, it can be capital intensive. One thing that we've done out there for the marketplace is we've developed the solution around, Airtower actually pays for infrastructure. We deliver connectivity infrastructure as a service, just like an electric bill comes to the property or the gas bill or the water bill. We have the connectivity now in more of a monthly subscription approach than significant capex to help really create a solution that can scale across a portfolio. So I think it's ultimately finding which forms of connectivity infrastructure that meet those use cases and ROI demands that we were talking about earlier, and then we talk about how to pay for it. I think it's making sure you get someone with it or a group with a creative way of making that happen for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. That hour flew by. I really appreciate both of you. If anyone here would like to be connected with either Manny or Sanj, I am happy to do that. Please send me an email. My email is franco@propmoto.com. It's FRANCO@propmoto.com. Thank you everyone for watching. Manny, Sanj, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks a lot.